Hello and welcome to Savage Garden, an interview with the vampire podcast sampling immortality one morsel at a time. I'm Kat, and my forever companion on this journey into eternal night is Naomi. And today we are discussing the penultimate episode of season 1, that's episode 6, Like Angels Put in Hell by God. Now, this episode ranks 7th on IMDb behind last week's A Vile Hunger for Your Hammering Heart, and it deals with the aftermath of that horrific drop. Naomi, last episode was a very tough watch. How did you find revisiting this one?
This one is interesting. It's directed by Levan Akin, who directed the previous episode, and written by Colleen Albert, who also wrote an episode of series 2. And I watched this after you did. I watched the series after series 2 had aired in America, and then kind of binge watched the whole thing. And I think, did you watch it once it hit iPlayer initially?
Yeah, so all of season 1 had dropped. Oh,
yeah.
Poor choice of words. But all of the first season was on there, and yeah, I think it was like 1 or 2 a day that I got through them.
Because I do think this episode works better if it flows immediately into the incredible Grand Guignol finale than watched as a standalone episode. Because of a standalone episode, this is just a bit of a downer. This is hate sex aside. This is an episode about an abuse victim going back to his abuser and everybody just being sort of shouty and mean. And we'll get into it. I do think it is a very interesting episode in terms of narrative bias, because with the exception of the scene on the train, at which point you are 1000% Queen Claudia, I don't love Claudia in this episode, because Claudia is placed in the position of being, she's like the girlfriend standing between the one true love couple in the rom-com. You know how in a rom-com there will always be, the guy will be with somebody, and so in order to ignore the fact that he is an adulterous pig who is cheating on this presumably very nice lady with our starlet of the hour, this person has to become, the girlfriend has to become shrill and horrible and nagging. And that's kind of what Claudia is in this episode. I mean, the only person in this episode with any sense whatsoever is Claudia. Because Claudia is like, hang on a minute. Wait, what? You want to get back with the guy that dropped you out of the sky and beat the hell out of you? No, Louis, we're not going to do that. No. But of course, we don't see that conversation. All we see is her being vicious and unnecessarily antagonistic to Lestat from the moment that they do reconcile, and being very teenage girl, because she is a teenage girl in terms of her emotions about Louis choosing Lestat over her. And so the narrative of this episode puts her in the position of the nag, of the one that is stopping our central duo from getting back together from their one true love. It's like when all the hordes of people would always complain about Skylar White in Breaking Bad, when of course she was just the very sane, sensible woman trying to protect her family from her absolutely insane husband's power crazy demands. And I do think that the narrative of this episode puts Claudia in the position of the nag. She is the one coming between Louis and Lestat. And so you find yourself going, oh, why is she being so mean? Why is she being so unkind? Why is she not accepting the entreaties of this incredibly handsome white man who's saying beautiful things? And I think it's really important to sort of look at our own sort of unconscious bias of how we do tend to favor the pretty white man, or if he's saying nice things, and do tend to believe him over somebody who is being openly angry and openly mean and very open with their emotions as to how unimpressed they are. But yeah, I think Claudia gets a bit of a rough shake in this episode because she gets put in the position of being the mean bitch coming between Louis and Lestat. even though she's the only one with any brains whatsoever.
I agree. It is, as you say, from when we get the reconcile sort of treaty meeting, all Louis says is, "Oh, but Lestat's trying, Claudia. You could try more. You could try more." And I think just the mere fact that she's even entertaining the idea of tolerating Lestat is her trying. How can you expect anything more, considering that, she was the one that witnessed this atrocity? As much as Louis is traumatized by being the victim of the attack, Claudia is too.
Yeah, I mean, she witnessed it. She saw this terrible thing happen. I mean, there is probably an element of slightly misplaced guilt here because, of course, she was gone for 7 years. As far as she knows, this drop was just another random Tuesday to Louis and Lestat. And I'm sure she feels terrible for, as she would see it, leaving Louis at Lestat's mercy for all that time. But yeah, the narrative very, very much wants you to empathize with Lestat until the point that it doesn't, which is, of course, the train scene, at which point we're all like, well, yeah, okay, fair dues. He's probably got to die, hasn't he, really? But until that point, it wants you to feel empathy and care for its hero. And Claudia is the one getting in the way of that. And it doesn't make for that much of a fun episode because she is very mean. And it's not much fun to watch. You're sitting there going, Jesus, Claudia, put a sock in it. But as you said, why should she be trying? Like, she's tolerating him even being in the same house as her. I feel that that's more than acceptable. And so we start our narrative with Louis recovering from his injuries. And as with all shows, these things are a little bit inconsistent. I mean, the Alderman shot him multiple times and he was absolutely fine. Whereas Lestat drops him here and he's obviously injured for a very significant period of time, which I thought was quite interesting. And we get the little nod to the wider Anne Rice books with Dr. Reid, who is there administering Daniel his treatment in modern day.
No, he's not. That man is not there.
Oh, that's true. Yes, he's not there. He is absolutely not there. He is not there. He is not there in any sort of shape or form. He's great. I'd love him to come back. He's like real Reid. He's an example of someone doing an awful lot with very, very little. I think the background actors in Dubai, I mean, it's not really a background actor, but you know what I mean? The smaller roles in Dubai are fantastically played by the gentlemen. They're very, very good. And I don't love Daniel in this scene either. I think Eric Bogosian is brilliant throughout the series, but in this particular sequence, he's just a bit too glib. He's a little bit too glib. Like, oh, so can you fly, Louis? Well, no, fucking well he can't because Lestat dropped him out of the sky. I appreciate that you are in pain from your Parkinson's, but is this really an appropriate thing to say? And, we do get that beautiful line, are we the sum of our worst moments? I mean, this has some, for almost sort of a slight filler episode in the run up to what is an incredible finale. This does have some really, really beautiful moments in it, I think. And the whole thing of, are we the sum of our worst moments, juxtaposed over these very domestic scenes of Claudia looking after him. And she's back to dressing like a little girl as well, which I thought was quite interesting. She's back to, because she kind of went for when she was with Lestat and Louis previously, the kind of the hard-edged, like dressing up type looks, and now she's kind of just more back to being a comfortable, not little girl because they're not infantilized, but things that you would see as slightly younger silhouette than certainly what she wears once she hits Paris in series 2. I loved the first scene when Lestat first tries to come to Louis and tries to make up. Claudia's just sort of very polite sighs at Lestat and the absolutely brilliant comic timing of Lestat's coffin being hurled out of the window behind him as he's trying to flowerily woo, Claudia over with the Book of Hours. I mean, how did he think he could show up on the doorstep looking pretty with a book and everyone would be like, oh, sure, Lestat, no worries. I appreciate you dropped me out of the sky and broke pretty much every bone in my body and I was blind for 6 weeks. But hey, babes, come on in. I mean, that was just never going to happen.
I mean, I think for Lestat, because I think Louis mentions it's been 3 years before Lestat makes that return. So I guess
okay,
for
so
Lestat,
I did a timeline because I was just like, I need to understand the timeline here. So they meet in 1910. Lestat turns Louis in 1911. So they rescue Claudia in 1917. So they've been together 7 years at that point. And then Claudia leaves in 1923. So they only get like 6 years of happiness with Claudia, which kind of sucks. Then she disappears in 1923 and doesn't come back until 1930 because she's gone for a full 7 years. So in 1930, they've been together for, at the time Claudia returns, which is the time of the drop, they have been together 20 years. But they've really only been together, arguably, for about, 13 of that happily, because the 7 years that Claudia was away, they're miserable. So they've been together 20 years, but kind of 13 happy years. And then Lestat drops Louis, and then they're apart for 7 years because he finally takes him back in spring 1937. At which point, he and Louis have been together for 20 years, and Lestat and Antoinette have been together for 20 years. Like, what is anyone doing here? I mean, it's a long time, but none of it's that happy, which makes me a bit sad.
with Lestat turning up on the doorstep, I think he feels like he has left it long enough. Like by now, Louis should have healed and got on with it. So I think he is a bit surprised when he just gets his coffin dropped. But interesting that they have kept onto the coffin for that amount of time.
Yep. Didn't smash it up. I mean, that coffin would have been smashed up and used as kindling in 3 seconds flat. So he did. You're right. Louis kept it for all that time. He kind of kept it and looked at it. I mean, it is a exquisite moment of comic timing, particularly there, sort of the slight twitch on Sam Reid's face when he sees it like hit the ground behind him. It's very, very well done. And then they do dress him beautifully during this period of groveling. I mean, the sequence when he shows up in the brand new incredible car and he's wearing that white short-sleeved top, with those clothes are tailored to within an inch of their lives. And he's an interesting physique because his shoulders are so much wider than his waist, which creates this like incredible taper. And I do think Lestat in this particular scene, they do dress Sam Reid in some of the most beautiful outfits in this episode. And he's got that short-sleeved white top on. And as you said, he's been gone for 3 years. And I mean, he isn't hugely manipulative in that scene where he's saying, basically, Louis, take me back. If you don't want me, say, and I'll go. The silence is cruel and you were never cruel. And it is, he's begging and it's very sweet and it's very charming. And this is where, as the audience, you're a bit like, oh, but he looks so handsome and he's got a nice car. And he said he's sorry, Louis, and it's been 3 years. Like, get over it already. And we have to say, it's all credit that Louis is like, absolutely not. And so it takes pretty much another 3.5 years before Louis is even willing to accept another entreaty from Lestat, at which point he immediately plays himself with the come to me sequence, which is my favorite scene in the whole thing. Except I've never quite understood the bit in Dubai. So Lestat records come to me, but records Antoinette doing it in the past and sends the disc to Louis because, of course, that's the kind of completely insane thing that he would do, put his girlfriend's voice on a love song that he has recorded for his one true love. But then Louis says this is an inferior re-recording from years later. Well, Louis, where did we get Lestat singing Come to Me then? Where did he get it from?
Yeah, because they say, don't they, that it was a one-off recording made
Yeah.
especially for him, but then they are listening to a re-recording. And in the past, we see Louis shatter the record after he sort of had enough of it. But I kind of wonder if that is again Louis's sort of narrative bias, where that's what he wanted to do, but maybe he didn't, and maybe it's not a re-recording. But there are ears listening in, so it's like, oh yeah, this is just an inferior, re-recording.
Yeah, because I was always confused by that. I was like, is that ever going to come back? Because obviously they were apart from all that time. So is Louis like, I don't know. I mean, Armand absolutely kept track of every single thing Lestat did from the moment they separated in Magnus's lair until the point at which Louis and Lestat reconcile in the modern day. So I doubt there was a single second of either Lestat or Daniel's life where Armand didn't know precisely where they were and what they were doing. But like, was Louis partly aware of that and sort of checking up on Lestat via Armand and somehow happens upon this re-recording? That whole thing never made sense to me. It's one of those little things that I'm not sure if it's going to be a thing or if it's just there, but it doesn't quite make sense. But most importantly, we have to talk about the hate sex scene, which is incredible. So we have 6 years, and he's like, 6 years of begging, you think a song is going to get a rise out of me? Babes, you've swum the Mississippi to storm through his door to find him and drag him back. He has played you like a fiddle. I mean, he goes flying through the door. Lestat is there completely naked in Antoinette's bed, completely at ease, absolutely naked, doesn't care, delighted, so delighted that Louis is there. And poor Antoinette. I mean, I've said before, I do feel bad for Antoinette. I know we shouldn't, because, Antoinette should have been very, very aware of the fact that this is someone else's man. This is not somebody that is single. But at this point, she has presumably been effectively living as Lestat's wife for what, 6 years? With no Louis whatsoever. Now, I imagine that she probably thought after 6 years, that was it. It was done, even with him like vanishing now and then to try and get Louis back and coming back and whining about it. But no, Louis wanders through the door, and all of a sudden she is immediately turfed out of her own home while Lestat and Louis have sex in the background. And I will never forgive the good people at AMC and Roland Jones for not giving us the scene that we deserved. We needed more of that reconciliation scene. It's very cute that he promptly stabs Lestat with it. But, we needed more. It is a phenomenal sequence. The chemistry they have is off the charts.
For Antoinette, as far as she's concerned, Louis not going to take the stat back. It's been years, and Lestat's obviously made her certain promises, which I guess as a woman of that time she was, clinging on to. She wants to be a star, and at some point Lestat has promised her that can happen. And yeah, she's unceremoniously kicked out of the bed where, I mean, they were both naked, so something was clearly going down. She's unceremoniously kicked out of the bed and out of her house, and then she just kind of stands outside the window listening and having a bit of a cry. It's the heartbreaking little scene.
It is. It's really, really sad because she just gets thrown out, poor thing. And yeah, well, in the background, Louis is very successfully doing precisely what Lestat wanted him to do, which is to beat the hell out of him. And, you know, because all Lestat wants is a reaction. All Lestat has ever wanted. That was Antoinette's entire point, was to provoke a jealous reaction from Louis. All Lestat ever wanted was for Louis to kill Antoinette, or at least acknowledge Antoinette's existence, because then that meant that he felt passionately or deeply enough about Lestat for him to be jealous of Antoinette. So, of course, showing up, kicking Antoinette out, and then immediately fucking Lestat in her bed is precisely what Lestat wants, what Lestat has always wanted. I mean, he could not be more happy. But it is a shaky grounds, one would say, for taking somebody back. Just the fact that you've can no longer quite bear the thought of him being with this woman that he, as I said, he's been with for 20 years at this point. Louis must have known that she wasn't going to vanish. And then we get the scene, we get Louis wittering on in the present about the vampire bond and how the vampire bond's unshakable. And Danielle's having absolutely none of it. Call him Danielle then. Very apt. Having none of it and being like, no, you just wanted him back. Just accept that you wanted him back. Because all this vampire bond stuff is just nonsense. He just loves Lestat and can't be without him.
Yeah, because if it was the vampire bond, then where's Claudia's vampire bond?
Yeah, exactly. Claudia can live quite comfortably without Lestat. She's like, I don't give a fuck about him. She's quite content living happily, but no. Louis cannot cope without Lestat. He's been without him for long enough. And I think that's one of the tragedies of their relationship with Claudia, is that while she always wants Louis to choose her over Lestat, but he wants both of them. He always wanted both of them. He doesn't want one or the other. He wants both. But I don't think she ever really fully accepted that he really needs Lestat. And I think she sees that as an inherent weakness in him, certainly towards the end of this episode. But he loves him. We should also comment on what a very beautiful voice Sam Reid has, singing Come to Me, which plays over the end credits. We only sort of hear a little bit of it in the episode itself. But yes, he has a very nice voice. He was in Girl from the North Country, which it's a very odd musical. I did not particularly love it, but there is a clip of him on the One show, because everything is sold on the One show, singing I Want You, and he does have a very fantastic voice.
I mean, considering that series 3 is going to focus on his sort of rock star career, it's, nice to get that little taster of obviously a very different genre of music, but a little taster of what's to come in a way.
He must be terrified, because it's one thing, because he hasn't done a huge amount of musical theatre. He's done things back home when he was a kid, and Girl from the North Country and this. But there is a difference between doing a song here and there and then all of a sudden effectively having to be Taylor Swift for a season. And I'm sure they're going to have, the image that everybody has is the lead singer of Maneskin in terms of how they want Lestat to be styled, but I'm sure they're going to go in different ways that will completely surprise us. But the music's probably going to cover a lot of different genres, but I imagine that must be daunting as hell to be like, hey, Sam, we know you're super shy, but you fancy being Taylor Swift for a season. But I want an album. If they're going to do enough songs, I want an actual album to be released, because AMC's merchandise, we have to talk about this. Their merch is crap. It's terrible. AMC, if you're listening to this, my friends, where's my replicas of Lestat's beautiful letter to Louis? Let's have some decent stuff. Can we actually hire a graphic designer, please, to do some T-shirts, to do some posters? Some vampire Lestat tickets. There's a lovely lady on Twitter that's been merrily doing that. I think Sam signed one last week. Let's have some actual proper merchandise rather than these terrifying body pillows that you've put out, which, to be honest, just scare me. I know people have bought them, but I don't. I'm very frightened of them. I don't think I could have it in my house. But yes, I would like a double album of the Vampire Lestat featuring Sam Reid. And while we're talking, all of Daniel Hart's soundtrack, please, on vinyl. Doesn't even have I don't think it's had any sort of a release so far, which is a crime because it very much needs it. I know that vinyl releases are very expensive, but his music is absolutely beautiful. And so after provoking Louis with the little gambit of the song, Louis takes Lestat back, and we have that scene of a very beaten and cowed, well, except not really, Lestat talking to a very unimpressed Louis and Claudia, who are setting down rules for him. And there is a part of me that's like, guys, do we not understand the nature of the beast? Why are we setting rules for Lestat? Do you think he's going to listen to a single solitary one of them or engage in any of this in good faith? You either take him as he is or you don't. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if you're having to set down rules for taking your partner back, it's probably not worth taking them back.
No.
As you say, it's people can't easily change themselves, and there has to be a want there. And Lestat, I don't think there is really that. He has been around for however many years, and he is quite set in his ways quite happily. And the fact that Louis has expressed an interest in him again, he kind of knows that, I mean, these rules are just a formality, really. I mean, for Claudia, they're deadly serious, but I think he knows that, well, Louis won't really care if he bends them.
Yep. And really at this point, you're like, Louis, you either take him as he is or you don't. And if you don't, fine, that's absolutely fine. Kick him to the curb. But he brings him back on the context of all of these rules and regulations, most of which are being set down by Claudia, who is at this point, openly hostile, openly antagonistic. So of course he's not going to listen to a word that she says. And the sad part is he's actually incredibly truthful when he tells her about his turning by Magnus. Every word he says in that scene is true, including about how, I mean, his turning by Magnus was terrible, and I'm very interested to see how they're going to portray it in series 3. It's a horrible, horrible thing, and it's quite hard watching him be so openly vulnerable and so upset about it in the face of Claudia's absolute hostility. Because, as we said in that scene, Claudia is sat there going, "What the fuck are you doing, Louis? Why am I sat in the same room as the man that dropped you from the sky? Have you lost whatever brain cells you had left?" So of course she's hostile. I would be too. But he is telling the truth to her, but she unfortunately never believes him, which is kind of, it's the real tragedy of Lestat and Claudia, is that they are so alike. And if there were moments when they could have given each other just that tiniest little bit of grace, both ways, obviously, we're not just talking about Claudia here, then it could have been so different, because all she wanted was to learn, and that was all he wanted too. But he just repeats the same, cycle of abuse that he learned from his parents by withholding the information about his heritage, withholding the fact that he can fly. I mean, it's all very well Louis trying to reason it out with, well, he thought it would make us feel unequal. No, he just kept it to himself because he could. We know that. And it's the same here. He could have told Claudia about things. He could have warned her. He could have helped her. He doesn't. And if they just, met each other just halfway, they could have had an incredible relationship and been kind of a terrifying team, I think. But it is not to be. And it is a great scene. I mean, Sam Reid is fantastic in it. His sequence, the bit where he says, "I didn't want this," is absolutely heartbreaking. When he says he has a capacity for enduring and that he doesn't like being abandoned. I mean, very manipulative, but really, really hard to watch. And of course, Claudia is having absolutely none of it. It's quite sad.
The story, it's so incredibly well delivered by Sam Reid. You know, but I think normally in a scene like this where someone's recounting the past, we'd have the, you know, the Wayne's World diddle it flashback, and we would, but you don't need to see it because his words are so powerful that you can see Lestat surrounded by corpses of men that look exactly like him. And, you know, he says like, my own eyes staring back at me, and yeah, it's so incredibly powerful. And yeah, it's the first time that he has really shared anything real about his past. And yeah, it's just a shame that it's delivered to an audience that aren't ready for it, that are so used to his lies that it's like, no, this is just another play to make you feel bad. Oh, Lestat didn't want to eat people, did he? Really? Well, he's doing a lot of it now. It's not taken with the sincerity in which it's delivered.
It's the absolute truth delivered to an audience that is completely expecting a lie. So they don't take any of it in. They don't listen to him. Claudia doesn't realize that he is being completely honest about how horrific his turning was, how he was dragged out of his home in Paris in the middle of the night by this man, kept for a week, tortured, and then, you know, forced to live in this place with all these rotting corpses. I mean, truly, truly horrific. But Claudia is expecting him to be lying. So that's all she hears. So he's delivering this to, I mean, they may as well be brick walls, because it's never clear whether Louis buys it or not. Probably not. And that's a real tragedy. Meanwhile, the good people of Nolans have started, to be fair, they've been quite slow to recognize that the people who have lived in the house for 30 years are not aging. So they're leaving like...
Actually, that little girl.
Yeah, that little girl's doing quite well, considering, well, she vanished for 7 years and then came back looking exactly the same. I feel probably if I lived nearby, I'd be like, nope, we are out of here. There's a fucking witch lives next door. Let's go. Come up. Let's get out of here before she comes and kills us all. Yeah, I mean, she vanishes for 7 years and she comes back exactly the same age, and then she remains exactly the same age for another 6, 7, 8 years before they actually kill Lestat and they leave. No. I mean, come on. It is no wonder that people are like, not sure about this, and they've kind of have it down as a marked household. And I'm not sure if the signs they're putting outside are to protect the people outside or to kind of curse them inside. But either way, they have finally been recognized, and it is most definitely time for them all to leave. And then we get the sequence of them on the park bench, which is kind of cruel as well, because the bench was sort of it was their spot, Louis and Lestat's, when they were courting. And now you've got this very unhappy family trio talking about Louis being sort of superior for only eating veggie. And he is quite pompous, I think, about his diet. And it is interesting to listen to him now, considering how wildly he changes in series 2, going back to just eating everything in sight. That here he sort of, makes both Lestat and Claudia, she admits it as well, feel quite resentful for the fact that he prefers a vegetarian lifestyle. And you have that awful bit of Claudia calling Lestat a dog and just not being willing to give an inch anywhere, which is, very, very difficult for Lestat and for everybody in the household. That's why I say it's not a fun episode, because it's an episode of everybody just being hostile at all turns, because Claudia is very much her father's daughter. And she does get the fantastic line when Lestat wants to tidy up of, we leave the damage so we never forget the damage. We see that in the little, the tiny little trailer that they did for SDCC, where you've got Lestat in the choker that is very purposefully made up to look like it's the line where Louis cuts his throat in the series 1 finale. And all of it, we see again that Louis keeps the coffin with the dent of Lestat's head in the top, which is quite a choice from their fight. So yeah, it's this is a show with some really beautiful lines in it, and this episode in particular has some absolute stunning lines kind of mixed in. And then we get the first of the chess scenes, and she is vicious in this scene, Claudia, because she throws Nikki's name in Lestat's face, and obviously she's heard that from Louis. So that's a private, confidence that she's got from Louis that she's throwing in Lestat's face. And she is cruel when she's being sort of reveling in the fact of his death, when she knows it's a real sore spot for Lestat, who's obviously, after Nikki's death, sort of crawled beneath the earth for 100 years and was there until he found Louis. So for her to be there quite gleefully throwing the suicide of his former lover in his face it's rough, it has to be said. If we've kind of reached that level of discourse in the household, it's probably the point where which everybody should just leave, really. If this is the kind of day-to-day dialogue we're having, I think this is the point when, let's just move on. And she's calling, she's sort of calling him master and joking around with that, with Louis, and trying to suggest that they are his slaves. And that's why it's so rough in series 2 when she's so eager to call Armand maître, because in series 1 towards the end she is openly manipulating Louis the whole way about the fact that she feels that she is a slave in this household. And I think up until the train sequence, she isn't a prisoner. Up until this point, this is just open manipulation of Louis because she hates Lestat for understandable reasons. And then we get the very French scene of him smoking naked in bed with Antoinette, complaining about them, which is hilarious. Because, of course, the first thing he does when he's fed up with them is go straight to Antoinette.
Because Antoinette obviously is, at this point, she's supposed to be dead. That was the fourth rule. We don't get what the other 3 rules were before that, but the fourth rule of him coming back is that he has to kill her. So, he delivers a finger, and apparently that is proof of an entire dead body.
I only saw it today, and it's wrapped in a newspaper article which says singer found dead in home. So the suggestion is
the house burned down.
Yes. Yeah, so he's burnt his house down and hacked Antoinette's finger off. Also, can we just say, Lestat, you are feral. You could have given them anybody's finger. You didn't need it to actually be Antoinette's finger. I mean, that's vicious and unnecessary. She didn't need to chop her own finger off. You could have gotten anybody. There's plenty of women out there.
I mean, and this is way before DNA testing, so it's not like they could have checked,
I was like, what?
Familiar.
Did you think that, they were going to somehow smell Antoinette on the finger? The whole thing is insane. He could have, it is, I suppose, though, it's a dual test, though, isn't it? As much as Claudia is insisting it's a test of Lestat's loyalty that he kill Antoinette, which he was never going to do because Claudia was the one that asked. If Louis had asked, Antoinette would have been dead in 5 minutes. But because Claudia asked, he's not prepared to, because who the fuck does Claudia think she is, getting in the way of their relationship? But if Louis had asked, he would have done it. But because this is Claudia's rule, he doesn't go through with it. But I guess it's a test for Antoinette as well, of her love, of how much she wants or needs to be with him, that she is prepared to let him do that. And it's not, we see her in this sequence, she's obviously got holes in her neck, but I think we assume she's still alive at this point.
Yeah.
Although that probably doesn't last for much longer after this, because he needs her to be able to read Claudia's mind. But she's still alive, still there, still wanting to be a star. And again, you're like, Antoinette, honey, I mean, at this point, you've been with this man for 20 years. He kicked you out of your own home to go back with the boyfriend that he beat up. But the fact that she's still with him when she knows he's violent. I mean, he beat Louis up, and she just assumes he won't do the same thing to her, I suppose. That's what people think, isn't it? Well, that was their relationship. That's never going to happen to me.
I think that is how it works for a lot of. I've known people that have been with people that have had an abusive past, and that has been exactly that. It's been like, oh no, but it won't happen to me. That was just like them. It was that person. They're the reason why they were violent. It wasn't, they won't possibly be violent to me. And yeah, but she's also desperate to be turned. She says to him in this scene, you promised, you got me hiding in like at the back end of nowhere. I want to be a star. I'm not getting any younger. Like we said, we discussed, a couple of episodes ago, like when is the perfect time? You kind of want the perfect time to return if you're going to get stuck forever. And if she wants to be a star, I mean, it's still prominent today. Women, get past 29, and then they disappear and come back in films as the mum. And if she's been with Lestat for 20 years,
all of it, when you look at it, all the stars, the second they hit 30, all of a sudden they're playing mums, all of them. And mums quite often to 17 and 18-year-olds. I mean, one of the things I did think when people have been fan casting Gabrielle, and I kind of hope that they go with a slightly unknown French or Italian actress, to be honest, because names like Gillian Anderson, people like that, they're just a bit too obvious. But they keep going for actresses like 45, 46, and you're like, guys, that would mean she had Sam Reid at 9. They keep all the fan casts for for actresses in their 40s instead of actresses in their 50s and 60s, which is what it should be. But yes, I think Antoinette at this point, and obviously there's from a psyche point of view, the fact that Lestat waits until Antoinette is kind of around the similar age to Gabrielle to turn her. That boy has so many issues. Dear God, so many mummy issues. But yeah, she must be in her 40s, mid 40s, I would think, by this point. I think we're supposed to assume, because if she's been with Lestat for 20 years, and she never seemed that young. So if she was in kind of her mid-20s at the point at which he first met her at the Azalea, yeah, she's like between 45 and 50 at this point. Which
so she's never gonna be a star. She wouldn't be a star now, let alone like
she wouldn't be a star now, sadly. It's just not how it happens. You could be a character actress and burst onto the scene in your mid-40s, but you can't be a star, because the world is as disgusting and misogynistic and obsessed with beauty as it's always been.
I'm just going to jump in and say my fan casting would be Claudia Girini. Probably butchered that name, but she was Gianna D'Antonio in John Wick 2, the lady with the big Roman bath.
Oh, yes. Oh my God, she'd be incredible. Yes. How old is she?
Yeah. She is 53, yeah.
Okay. So I mean, she'd have to have had Lestat young, but I feel like that probably would have been the case, actually. I do hope they go for somebody in their kind of mid-50s, because I think if we do get some, zygote 40-year-old, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I know that Sam Sam Reid looks very good for, what is he, 30, 37, 38, but it would be good for them to actually cast somebody who is age appropriate. But yeah, she would be fantastic. I don't really have a fan cast. It's quite hard to tell because I think they've done so well about picking. I suspect they might go for a Brit theatre actor because that's what they've kind of focused on a lot so far. They've pulled very heavily from that pool, but it would be great if they got somebody like that.
Just going by the, Italian actress, slightly unknown. And it's like, I know somebody that's Italian and
yeah,
slightly
because
unknown.
Gabrielle is Italian, and then she is married off to French aristocracy, even if it is very sort of poor French aristocracy. And then she ends up having all these children that she loathes. And then, second Lestat turns her, poop, she chops all her hair off, dresses as a boy, and goes off and has adventures in the Amazon, as she should. But she does come back to save Lestat from Akasha when the Akasha and all the vampires attack him at the Vampire Lestat's concert. So very, very much want to see her. And I love, by the way, that Sam Reid at his recent sort of press outings has adopted method dressing. He's been wearing like rings, and he had initials on his hand for I think all the main characters, and an A and I think it was probably an A and an E for Akasha and Enkel, which is the ancient ones. So very interesting. I love that he's having fun with it. But getting back to this, yes, poor Antoinette in that scene, she's openly got wounds on her neck, with Lestat just whining about his wife, basically his wife and daughter, isn't he, in this sequence, effectively. And she's like, oh, we can go anywhere, we can do anything. And he's like, no, New Orleans is my home. And you'll want to be like, Antoinette, honey, he's never going to leave Louis. Never going to leave him for you. And Claudia shows Louis, obviously, that Antoinette is alive, which I feel, again, Louis probably already knew. He just didn't want to be confronted with the reality of it. I very much think he knew who Lestat was. He never thought he was going to go through with it. But he, as he said, if he thought that I would take him as he was, he would kill Antoinette in a heartbeat. And that is Louis' little power play by refusing to kill Antoinette, or kind of show any reaction over it whatsoever. He kind of denies Lestat the satisfaction of knowing that he's been provoked, knowing that him being with her does hurt him deeply. And yeah. And then we have Claudia busy setting her traps and trying to sway Louis to her side while Louis and Lestat are having sex, which does feel deeply inappropriate on many, many, many levels. I feel that their relationship at that point, everyone is just, the boundaries of all of these relationships are just truly uncomfortable at this point. And Louis is now fully suicidal, and we get this incredible sequence of Jacob Anderson and Bailey Bass of Louis saying goodbye to Claudia and encouraging her to go on the train. And I think that Jacob Anderson is so, so good in that scene. He pretty much broke me when he's saying, I'm no good for you, go on without me. It is absolutely heartbreaking because Louis is just, he's done. He's got a partner that hurts him, that loves him, but doesn't love him enough to do the one thing he's been asked to do, which is to get rid of Antoinette. That is openly antagonistic and just fights nonstop with his daughter. So there's no peace in their home. They've been recognized by all the people in the neighborhood. It's time for them to go. And he is just, he is suicidal in this sequence. He is Louis is kind of at his end, but he wants that one last thing for Claudia, which is for her to be able to escape and see the world. And it is an absolutely heartbreaking scene.
It's he was ready, the lines, I was ready to face the sun, but I couldn't do that to Claudia when she was celebrating her freedom. it's so sad, and then it's even sadder with what comes next.
So the train scene. So up until this point, you're like, well, look, Lestat is a shit husband. He's an abuser. We've had this horrific thing happen. Yes, it's been years, but years do not absolve an individual. But at this point, has he done enough to be killed? Probably not. Then the train scene comes along and you're like, okay, fair enough. I still say that I would have very much preferred that we only got this train scene and not the drop, which still feels so wildly out of character for Lestat. Because Louis could have just kicked him out for refusing to stop fucking Antoinette. There was no need to have this domestic abuse angle to it. But this sequence on the train is horrible. Claudia is so giddy. She's so excited about her new freedom. And then Lestat comes wandering in. And I hate that they use the scene of him holding the conductor's head for memes all the time, because it's not funny. It's a horrific scene of him dragging her back. And it is him dragging her back into slavery at this point, because he is literally holding her hostage. He knows that Louis needs her. He knows that Louis will probably commit suicide without her, that he is not enough for Louis, that he needs both of them. And so he doesn't give a shit about Claudia. And he comes and drags her off the train. And the whole sequence is, there are very few scenes in the first series that are out and out horror. And this scene is, I think. This scene is just out and out horror from start to finish. It's horrific. You've got him, playing with the Mastiff whilst simultaneously saying, "Back in your cage, sweetheart," and threatening Claudia. I do think that we're going to find out that by this time in the narrative, Bruce, who he teases her with, which is completely and utterly unforgivable, I do think we're going to find out that Bruce is dead and that he's already killed him at this point, but has absolutely no qualms whatsoever in scaring his child to death with her rapist.
Yeah, it's a really icky scene, because especially knowing that Lestat himself is a survivor of sexual assault, to throw the abuser at the sufferer is just so cruel. And it's the whole Bruce, when I try really hard I can hear really far, and Bruce, he thinks of you often. It's like, no, you don't need this. Just drag her back if you're dragging her back.
I do think we're going to find that he's already found and killed Bruce at that point, but we can't give him any credit for white knighting, because this is what he does. I mean, teasing her with it, suggesting to his daughter that her rapist is fondly thinking of him raping her. It's disgusting. Absolutely repulsive behavior from Lestat here. And then when he says, "If you leave again, I'll do more than break your leg and defile your pocket. I'll grind your bones to dust."
Yeah. It's
a horrendous scene, and it's a difficult scene because, as I said, people tend to use it for memes, because you have Sam Reid's extraordinary delivery of "you left without saying goodbye again," which is very well done. It's very well done. It's very funny, but it's not a funny sequence. And sometimes the AMC account will pop this up on things, and you're like, no, we're not doing little jokes about the scene in which he torments his child with her rape. I'm sorry, no, we're not doing that. And I mean, this scene, and again, we talk about the narrative and whether because we can't have everything being untrue. We can't have this being a fiction. So I don't think for a second this is. This is what happened, and he seals his fate at that point because Louis has absolutely no choice. I don't believe for a second Louis at any point wants to kill Lestat, but he has to keep his daughter safe from him. He has to. I mean, as soon as this happens, I mean, it's an absolute horror movie scan when Louis comes back and Lestat's talking about Hitler having invaded Poland, and then we scan across and Claudia is sat there. It is devastating. Such a truly, truly horrible sequence. And yeah, Lestat does deserve to die, unfortunately.
Yeah, World War II has begun, and the end life of Lestat has also.
They have no other choice. They have absolutely no other choice. He is clearly never going to allow Claudia her freedom. He's never going to give her the education that she wants, because in the same way he is just repeating the cycles of abuse that he learned. So he is withholding in the same way that his family were withholding, and in the same way that his family dragged him back when he wanted to be a monk, when he wanted to go and be with the players. He's dragging Claudia back from that life of freedom because all he cares about in this world is Louis. And he does care about Claudia. I truly believe that, but not as much as he cares about Louis. And he knows that Louis will die without Claudia. So he's never going to set her free. He's never going to be free of Louis. And I think Louis accepts in his soul that he loves Lestat too much to ever be truly free of him. And we see that played out time and time again in the narrative. And so there's no choice. He has to die. And then we get that brilliant, brilliant chess sequence at the end, which is the absolute foreshadowing for the end of it. And Claudia is done with both of them at this point. She is done. She has been dragged back. You know, she has had to live for quite a few years. Because we're not quite clear of the timings here, but presumably it's been like a couple of years since Lestat came back. So she's had to live with this guy that beat her father up for a couple of years, just sniping at her and being miserable and all the rest of it. And yeah, sure, she's giving as good as she's getting, but it's still grim. He called her a mistake. He's the one who drove her off the first time. And now she's back in this household with this man who thrown her own rape in her face. And she's done with him. She wants him dead, and she's happy to openly manipulate Louis to make sure that happens. But we have the chess sequence with the rook protecting the king and the queen being neutralized, which is, of course, what ultimately happens at the end, because Louis cannot quite go through with the final action he needs to go through with to get rid of Lestat. And everything about their relationship is in that brilliant moment when Lestat realizes that he has finally been beaten by Claudia, but she doesn't even need to take the final move because she knows. She doesn't have to give him the satisfaction of like actually winning against him, because she already knows she has. So she can just go to bed. And his fury and his pettiness and his screaming. And poor Louis just sat there like, fuck, I'm going to have to kill him, aren't I?
Yeah. But yeah, the look of realization on Lestat's face when he realizes that she has bested him, because obviously he has been the one teaching her chess, and obviously in earlier scenes, you know, he's won quite easily. As we've seen time and time again, Claudia is a fast learner. You know, she went away in those 7 years. She read so many books. She's learned several languages in order to read some of the books, and she's a quick study. And yeah, she's bettered him at chess. And yeah, it's just kind of like a chef's kiss moment, isn't it, where she does just walk off and she doesn't give him the satisfaction of, because I imagine that he would be like, oh well, you only won because I like taught you how to do this. But by not finishing that game, he doesn't get that opportunity to say that. She's just like, yeah, well, see ya.
Well, yeah, because he's in check. He knows he's in check, which is the most important thing. There's no move that he can make that results in his win. So she doesn't have to do the final move. She doesn't have to give him the satisfaction of the death blow because she knows. And yeah, poor Louis is just sat there going, right, we need this situation. This war cannot continue. We cannot have this violence. It has to end. And there's only one way it can end, and that is to protect my daughter. And then back in modern day, the entire episode, by the way, has had Daniel in front of the bacon triptych the whole way through, which is very interesting in what it signifies. We finally have him nodding off to his medication, and we flash back to the groovy 70s. Luke Brandon Field, who is, the way that he has copied Eric Bogosian's mannerisms is mildly terrifying. If you see all the various different press shots and the way that he's modeled himself and held himself, it's incredible. And we get the first big, slightly unsubtle dun, dun, dun ending when who is there with Louis in this bar? Is it Rashid in a very
20,
charming...
It's 20. Yeah, it's what 20. They say in this episode that he's in his 20s. It's 20-something Rashid alive
It's 20
in the 70s.
something. Yes, super hip, very young 20-something Rashid, the noble lackey of Louis de Pont-de-Lac, and there he is in a bar in the 70s with his beautiful locks and sort of like, was it like a brown plaid jacket, looking slightly tired at the fact that Louis is there fucking around on him and picking up some random dude in a bar to score. But yeah, it's very unsubtle, but it's very good. They're sort of the reveal of 1970s Rashid, coupled with Eric Bogosian's big gasp at the end.
I know it would have been a shock for people on a first watch, but as I said previously, I'd gotten on very early just because I was so familiar with the film. I was waiting for Armand to turn up, and we weren't getting there. And it's like, well, who is this chatty little helper?
I don't think I knew he was Armand. I think he knew that he was a vampire simply because he's just too bolshy the whole way through. All the way through, and also if you watch it from his mannerisms, he's in control of the surroundings every single step of the way through the process, whilst seeming to be deferential. He's not. He's very clearly, like, there's a sequence in this where he like switches, there's light coming through those like tempered windows that he switches off. But yeah, he is, for as much as Louis appears to be in control, it's always very clear in every scene, if you watch them, and it's very well done, that Armand is in control. Armand's not, even in the stupid bookshelves being up high so that only Armand can get to them. But I didn't necessarily know that he was Armand. Although you're right, I was waiting for Armand, but I just thought that as we were doing two parts that we were going to introduce Armand in series 2, not that he'd been on screen the whole way through. Also because I think you do get an image stuck in your head, because obviously Armand in the books is a teenage ginger. They're never going to be a teenage ginger here. But you had Antonio Banderas in the film. So I was looking for a Spanish guy, because you get that image in your head and you think, well, they're going to do the same thing. So obviously you are not looking for a South Asian gentleman. So yeah, it was very, very well done. The reveal is fantastic. And I love that it gives Daniel his big telenovela moment.
Yes, I did like you say that, he's kind of always had control, but there was a brief moment during this episode where Louis offers to turn Daniel, and there's just a little flicker of like, what? from Amon's like, what? Which I quite enjoyed.
Yes.
He clearly was not expecting that at all.
Yeah, he says that he would give it to him now, and Daniel turns it down on the grounds that he doesn't want to watch his children grow old and die without him. But there is, yes, you're right, there is this little brief flicker of not on my fucking watch you won't, when he says he'll turn him, because there was only ever going to be one maker of Daniel, I think, and it was certainly not going to be Louis. But yes, that is that, and again, in itself, it's a great little moment that Sad Man does a great deal with. He's a fantastic actor. But yeah, that was a lovely moment. And that then is our last episode before the big finale. So much to talk about in the finale. Have to say, I'm going to say it at great length when we come to talk about it. No man in human history has ever looked as beautiful as Jacob Anderson does in the Mardi Gras outfit in the finale. Obscenely beautiful. So yes, looking forward to that. Do please follow us on social media. We'll have the links in the show notes. Do please follow us on Spotify and whatever platform you're finding this on. It really does help. It helps enormously. And drop us an email. You've all been a bit shy so far. We've been kind of blown away about the number of people that are listening. We really have been. But do, if you have any questions or if you want us to talk about anything in particular, do drop us an email. And yeah, we will look forward to tuning in next time for the big finale.
Yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks to discuss season 1 finale, The Thing That Lay Still.